In 1982, a fight over a few tiny islands way out in the middle of the South Atlantic somehow blew up into a full-scale war. It was a conflict that had the entire world glued to their TVs for 74 days. So today, we're going to break down how and, more importantly, why it all happened. This is the story of the Falklands War.
So let's just start with the question that was on everybody's mind back then. Why on earth would Britain, a major world power, send an entire naval fleet 13,000 kilometers, that's halfway around the globe, to fight for a handful of remote, windswept islands? I mean, when you think about it, it sounds kind of crazy, right?
Well, on this day, the crazy thing actually happened. Argentine forces stormed the Falkland Islands, which they call Las Malvinas, and quickly took control. You know, back in Argentina, people were celebrating in the streets. But in Britain, it was pure outrage. And just like that, the stage was set for war. To Argentina, this was a moment of national pride, of taking back what was rightfully theirs. But to Britain, it was a flat-out invasion of their sovereign territory. And the response was incredibly fast and powerful. You have to remember, the distance and the logistics, it was a nightmare. But they pulled together this massive naval task force and sent it sailing south to take the islands back, by force.
Okay, so to really get why this happened, we've got to hit rewind. This conflict didn't just pop up out of nowhere in 1982. Nope, this was the violent explosion of an argument that had been simmering for centuries. So, how did we even get here?
Well, right at the heart of it, you can see the whole conflict just in the names. To Argentina, they are Las Malvinas. They see them as geographically theirs, a legacy inherited from the old Spanish Empire. But to Britain, they are the Falklands. Their claim is based on who found them first, and this is super important, on the right of the people living there to decide their own future. It's two totally different ways of seeing the world, focused on the exact same spot on the map.
And this timeline just shows you what a tangled mess the history is. So you have a British captain visiting way back in 1690. Then the French set up a colony in 1764. Then, when Argentina becomes independent in 1816, they say, hey, those are ours. Then boom, in 1833, the British come back, kick out the Argentinians, and set up shop for good. You fast forward all the way to 1965, and the UN steps in and basically says, okay guys, this is officially a disputed territory, you need to talk it out. The only problem? Those talks went absolutely nowhere.
All right, so if this whole thing has been going on for centuries, why 1982? What was so special about that year? Well, the answer isn't just in the history books. It's in the crazy political pressure cooker that both countries found themselves in at that exact moment. This really was a perfect storm. So over in Argentina, you have this brutal military junta in charge. Their economy was in a total free fall. There were protests, and they were behind the horrible, dirty war where thousands of people just disappeared. They were desperate for something, anything, to rally the country and make people forget the chaos. And reclaiming Las Malvinas was the perfect patriotic distraction. At the exact same time, Britain was looking kind of weak. They had their own economic problems and were slashing their military budget. To the generals in Argentina, it looked like there was no way the British could or would fight back from 13,000 kilometers away.
And boy, was that a miscalculation. What came next was 74 days of some of the most intense, brutal fighting the world had seen in years. This was a modern war, fought with jets and missiles and submarines in one of the harshest, most unforgiving places on the planet.
The British response was codenamed Operation Corporate, and it was absolutely monumental. They put together a task force of 127 ships. We're talking warships, supply ships, and even luxury cruise liners that they quickly converted to carry troops. Can you imagine? It was just an unbelievable logistical achievement. At sea, the war turned deadly fast. On May 2nd, a British submarine, the HMS Conqueror, fired torpedoes at the Argentine cruiser, the ARA General Belgrano. It sank, and 323 Argentine sailors died. That number, it's nearly half of all of Argentina's military deaths for the entire war. Now, it was a really controversial attack, but it had a massive impact. After that, the rest of the Argentine Navy basically went back to port and stayed there. But Argentina had a terrifying ace up its sleeve. It wasn't their ships, it was their air force, armed with a handful of state-of-the-art French-made anti-ship missiles. They were called exocets. And just 2 days after the Belgrano went down, Argentina hit back hard. One of their jets launched an exocet, and it slammed right into the British destroyer HMS Sheffield.
The ship was torn apart by fire and 20 British sailors were killed. This was a huge shock. It was the first time a Royal Navy warship had been sunk in combat since World War II. This war was definitely not going to be a walkover.
But here's the thing, Britain wasn't fighting alone. The US jumped in with critical support, missiles, fuel, you name it. And then there's the really wild part. France, the very country that sold those deadly Exocet missiles to Argentina, ended up siding with their NATO ally, Britain. They gave the British the technical secrets of the missile and even helped train their pilots. Talk about complicated politics, right? But even with all that help, the outcome was on a razor's edge. The Argentine pilots were incredibly brave, flying super low to get to the British ships. But that meant their bombs often didn't have enough time in the air to arm themselves. And just listen to this quote, it's staggering. A top British commander said that if just 6 of the 13 bombs that hit their ships but didn't explode had gone off, Britain would have lost the war. That's how close it was.
So after weeks of absolutely brutal fighting, British troops marched into the capital, Stanley, on June 14th, and Argentina surrendered. The war was over. But just because the shooting stopped, it doesn't mean the story ends there. Not even close.
First, you just have to take a moment to look at the human toll. In those 74 days, 649 Argentinians lost their lives. So did 255 British service members, and 3 Falkland Islander civilians were killed in the crossfire. That is a heavy, heavy price. And the political fallout? Wow, it was a complete mirror image. For Britain's Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, the victory was a game changer. It transformed her into the Iron Lady and won her a huge landslide election. But for the military junta in Argentina, the humiliating defeat was the last straw. The regime crumbled, and incredibly, it led to the country's return to democracy. Now, ever since the war, Britain's whole argument comes down to one thing: self-determination. They say the people who actually live there should get to decide. And in 2013, the islanders held a vote to make their choice crystal clear. And I mean, look at these numbers. 99.8% voted to stay with Britain. Only 3 people voted no. But Argentina doesn't recognize that vote at all.
And this right here, this is the emotional core of why this whole thing is still so raw today. It's not just about land anymore. It's about identity. For Argentina, Las Malvinas are a powerful symbol of national pride, a piece of their soul that they believe was stolen. For Britain and the islanders, the Falklands stand for a fundamental principle, that a people have the right to choose their own destiny. So that leaves us with the big, difficult question, doesn't it? When a piece of land means so much to so many people, for 2 completely different, deeply emotional reasons, how do you ever find a peaceful solution? It's a question that decades after the guns finally fell silent, still has no answer.